Hi, it's Gemma here. Welcome to the course, and I'm so pleased that you've decided to join us and start working on your basic skills. Honestly, A-level chemistry is going to be a lot easier for you if you've really got a grasp of the basics, and that's exactly what we're going to cover. So this course is a mixture of notes, worksheets, questions, and videos to help you get that foundation. Now, I'll talk you through in a minute about which skills we're going to cover, but I just want to explain why I've chosen these skills first of all. So chemistry is one of those subjects where you can't really do anything unless you can do the basics. So for example, when you're learning how to do the amount of substance calculations and calculate moles and masses and back titrations and all of that, you often have to write your own balanced equation so that you can work out the mole ratio. Now, if you can't confidently balance equations, it's going to be a lot more difficult than it needs to be, and you'll run into problems with the calculation. Now, even worse, if you can't confidently work out the formulae of the compounds and ions that are involved, you won't be able to write the equation, even if you could balance it, and then you still won't be able to do the calculation. So we end up with this compound effect where if you can't do this basic thing, you can't do that, and then you can't do that, and then you can't do what it is that you're actually needing to do to answer the question. So the skills I've included in this course are those kind of skills. They're the little basic things that I've found over the last 10 years are what cause students problems. Now, we'll talk through the skills, we'll cover them, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what to expect in each lesson. So this is our roadmap that we'll be following, and there's a printable version of this as well, so you can print it off and tick them off as you go. So starting with the first lesson, this is where I'll get you to revise some of the basics that you would have learnt for GCSE. So things like identifying ions, identifying compounds, naming them, knowing the correct formulae, working out the molar masses, etc. Now, I won't teach you any of this stuff because the point is it is supposed to be in your head already from GCSE. What I'll ask you to do instead is work through a series of quizzes which will get you to test your knowledge of these, and you'll be able to revise as you go along so that you can just get a bit of a refresher, but maybe identify where you do have these gaps in your knowledge. Now, it's probably going to be the case for most of the questions that if you get them wrong, just having been through the question and looked at the correct answer is enough to help you see where you've gone wrong and fill that gap in. But you might need to dig out your GCSE textbook here and do a little bit of revision. But it's important that you do before you move on, okay? Now on to the next lesson. This is where we'll have a review of polyatomic ions, and we'll make sure that you know the formulae and the charges, etc. for the common ones that you'll meet for chemistry. Now these pop up all over the place in various different chapters and when you're writing equations as well. And I'm always surprised that a lot of students don't really know these. So things like being able to work out the formula and charge for a carbonate ion is what we'll be covering here. Now, there's not much to do in this lesson, but I'll give you a list of the ions to learn, and you need to commit them to memory as soon as you can. On to lesson 3, we'll take a look at balancing equations. Now, balancing equations can be quite hard, but I'll show you the way that I do it, and I'll teach you a method that makes it as easy as possible and stops the kind of overthinking that causes students problems with equations. Now, there's a video lesson there, and I'll give you a worksheet with some quite challenging equations to practice with. Now, on to the fourth lesson. This is where we'll look at the reactions of acids and work out the formulae of salts. So by this time, this is where we kind of tying things together. So you're taking your knowledge of the polyatomic ions and your knowledge of how to balance equations, and you'll start to write your own equations. But still, this should be revision because these acid reactions are assumed knowledge from GCSE. A lot of students don't know them though, and they do pop up all over, just like the polyatomic ions. And if you can't confidently work out the equation, you will have problems. So in that lesson, I'll talk you through the reactions you need to know, and I'll give you a worksheet to practice with to make sure you're confident. Now on to the next section of the course, and lesson 5. This is where we start to look at the more mathsy skills and get you to the level that you need to be for A-level with things like problem solving, significant figures, and knowing how to do unit conversions. Now unit conversions can be quite awkward because they're a little bit counterintuitive sometimes, and if you don't get your unit conversions right, you're going to have real problems with the calculations. So in this lesson, we'll talk through a thought process that you can use to help you work out what to do rather than having to memorise all of the conversions. And I'll show you a way that I do it and the way that I used to think about it for A-level. And it's a bit weird and it involves thinking about measuring a table, but it works really well for me. So I'll show you that. I'll also give you a cheat sheet which will show you the common unit conversions you need to know how to do. But you do need to, again, commit these to memory as well at some point. Now on to lesson 6. This is where we'll look at significant figures, and we're looking at significant figures specifically in the context of A-level chemistry calculations. And we'll talk about the way that you need to handle them and how to decide how many significant figures you need for the final answer, etc. there. On to lesson 7. And this is where we'll take a look at a problem-solving method for approaching calculation questions. So for chemistry, if you approach everything in a kind of problem-solving, systematic sort of mindset, you'll have a lot more joy with it than you would otherwise. And that's even more important for calculation questions than it is for anything else. Because some of the questions you get are going to be really kind of dense and difficult looking, but I'm going to teach you a way to break them down and figure out what it is that you need to do, and it will all get a little bit easier. So in that lesson, I'll also show you how to do one of those more difficult titration questions, and I'll show you what to do with those questions where you've got all sorts of different volumes to work with. Now on to the final section. This is where I'll give you the chance to get a bonus, which will be a cheat sheet, which shows my top 40 tips for A-level chemistry. So this will include the common mistakes people make and that you want to avoid, and easy ways to do things. Now to get that cheat sheet, I'm going to ask you to send me a testimonial for this course. Now it's entirely optional, it's up to you, but I'd really appreciate if you did, because this is a free course, it will always be free, and I want to get it out to as many students as I can so that they can start benefiting from having these skills. So if you could help me out with that by giving me a testimonial, I'd be really grateful. And then when we've done all of this, you'll be an absolute pro, at the basics at least, for A-level chemistry. Now, I'm not saying that you won't ever struggle with anything again, because you will. You know, you'll always come across more awkward things when you learn new stuff. But the point is you will have that solid foundation that will make it all easier. So I'll see you in the next lesson, and I look forward to talking you through these skills. Bye-bye.